This online store discount temporarily forced me out of my hiatus. Hey there, today I have an unboxing video, and in this video I'm going to open up an order that I placed with Mile High Comics, and this order was placed recently. This is not an order that I held on to for several years, just in my backlog of orders that I haven't opened. This was an order of comics that I placed soon after I found out that Chuck was offering a 70% off 50th anniversary coupon code. 70% off is the highest I've ever seen a discount coupon code be made available for Mile High Comics. I typically tried when I wasn't on a break from purchasing comics, tried to target 60%. The coupon would kind of fluctuate between 50 and 60. A couple times it would temporarily go up to 65. I've never seen it 70%. Not only did it force me out of my buying hiatus, which, just to be clear, it's not a comic book collecting hiatus by any means. It's just purchasing new books. It's focusing on the collection that I have, improving what I have, considering sending books off for cleaning, pressing, and grading, and so forth, and just opening past orders, curating, spreadsheeting, all the things that I love about the hobby. But I had paused purchasing comic books while I got caught up, but I just could not pass up at the chance to take a look at what Mile High had in inventory and kind of look and see if there were really any deals after the 70% coupon was applied. And I know that that is something that I think everybody struggles with purchasing comics online, is that Mile High Comics, while the inventory is greater than no other source for comic books, it's just that the prices are just out of reach for most books. And while I understand that, not only did this coupon code tempt me into placing this order, I actually overhauled my analysis for how I determine which books to buy. And I'll share a little bit more insight into that as I go through the order summary after I show you the comics that I picked up. The order summary will be at the end of this video. I'll show you what I paid for the books and compare what I paid for each comic book against fair market values and the fair market value of the book if I were to send it off to CGC for grading. The basic summary of the change that I made was I created a new metric called Potential Value Index, or PVI. And what I tried to do is look at all of my different formulas and algorithms and the way that I compute and aggregate comic book values across a number of sources and price guides. What I'd done in the past is I'd come up with a sort. It was kind of a priority order. These are the books that you should purchase in this order. But it was taking into consideration maybe raw book values and some other things that maybe were a little bit more difficult to track. There was a little bit of kind of a leap of faith with some of the prioritization, and I wanted to come up with something that was a little bit more analytical than I had been doing, which was pretty analytical, but this took it a step further. And essentially this PVI score, it just assigns a number to a book that then I can sort by that number. But instead of every book being relative to each other in terms of the sort, the PVI is kind of a standard metric, meaning if there's one book at one store and it's the only comic available, it will have a PVI number assigned to it, whereas before it was all based on all of the other books relative to one another, meaning this was the best book available. But just because it was the best available doesn't always mean it was a smart purchase, and that's the general tweak that I made. And you can think of PVI almost like a value grade. And I'm probably getting too deep in the weeds when I'd rather just unbox this order and show you the comics. But the PVI assignment really drove the choices that I made in this order. So I want to go ahead and unbox this and show you which comics I picked up. And I'll talk about PVI and some of the other adjustments I made in terms of looking at conditions from Mile High Comics specifically, which will all be made available to you when I go through the order summary. But before then, let's take a look at the great comics that I picked up, that I was really grateful and appreciative that Mile High Comics made these available. And I'm really excited to show you what I picked up. Okay, here's the shipment that I received from Mile High Comics. Whenever I'm purchasing from Mile High Comics, I always choose FedEx. If you place an order of $65 or more, it's free shipping. And then when you check out, just switch your shipping option from USPS to FedEx. I always love the FedEx service and the process from Mile High Comics. It's very consistent, very straightforward, and also very quick. I placed this order late last week, so within about a week, had these comics received here in my possession. And now it's time to get this opened up. All right, nice and easy. Everything's well packed. It always is from Mile High Comics. Like I said, very straightforward process. This was probably one of the largest orders in terms of quantity. I typically target maybe 6 to 8 books from Mile High Comics just to kind of separate the cost involved, because I do end up spending a bit more with them. But having not purchased anything from Mile High for many months, felt like it was okay. I was giving myself permission to splurge a little bit and spend a little bit more money and order a few more books than I normally would. Part of me did FOMO a bit because of the 70% discount and some of the books that were there, with me feeling like it was a good deal. I wanted to make sure that I picked them up before they went out of stock. So happy to share with you the books that I picked up, and I'm really excited not only to see the books, but also to see the condition, because I do consider ordering from Mile High Comics to be a bit of a condition mystery. But all of these books were listed in near mint condition, and let's get started with the first book, and it is Werewolf by Night, number 29. Cover art here by Gil Kane and Klaus Janson. And just taking a quick look at the condition, obviously miswrapped, but just some slight, I would say, like miscoloring or blunting of this corner here. But wow, already with the first book, I'm very, very impressed and happy with how this turned out. You can kind of see that the miswrap is actually helping support the spine, but all around, just a tremendously high-grade copy of Werewolf by Night 29. So off to a good start here. The next book, and I love picking this one up, especially from Mile High Comics every time I see it, is Thor 333. This is part of a 2-issue arc related to a Doctor Strange storyline. And we have Thor here battling Dracula. And one of my favorite aspects of this book is that we have cover art by Bill Sienkiewicz. And then just checking out the condition, it does have a tiny bit of a stacking crease, possibly could be either color loss or a color tick right up there at the top. And then there is just a little tiny spine tick right there on the edge with just a little bit of a crease right in there. I know the bag's kind of covering it, but you can kind of see with the light, that's actually on the comic, not the bag. So again, another high grade. All of these books are probably going to be marked by me as candidates that would be improved with a clean and press. It kind of goes without saying, it's very rare for me to get a book from Mile High Comics that would go in for like a pre-screen or just a straight submission in hopes to get a 9.8. They all have a little bit of, I would say, like handling wear. But what I'm trying to do is understand that I'm not going to get these books in that like 9.6, 9.8 condition, but find the books that have the ability for improvement, pressable defects, and so forth. And that's really what I'm trying to eyeball and target with these books. Next is Creatures on the Loose, number 34. This is significant because it is the first Marvel art by George Perez. He did the cover for this. Love the perspective here, featuring Man-Wolf. This, unfortunately, as I look at it, so this is an example of what I don't want to see, which is 2 color-breaking ticks here in the spine. There's nothing in the world that's going to help that, so you're already looking at probably this book maxing out at a 9.4. So even if I ran it through a clean and press to buff it out a little bit, it's just going to max out there most likely. Not the best wrapping on this book either. As you can see, the price box wraps around to the back. So this is also kind of the gamble with Mile High, and why I factor in risk also when I'm calculating that new PVI score. looking at condition probability, probability of improvement, and other factors to really kind of inform me with that score to say, hey, this is a smart purchase, or you're going to be really taking a gamble and risking things. Now, for me personally, it wouldn't be a Mile High Comics order without picking up Man-Thing. This is Man-Thing #1. This is the second series of Man-Thing from 1979. I really love this issue. I've gotten several of these from Mile High, and also got several of them graded. And you can kind of see why, just looking at the condition of this. The colors look great. Nice, vibrant orange and green. Blues from the water. Like all of the general color and everything looks intact. Edge looks fine. Corner looks good. That has just the slightest of blunting. You know, it's possible that this could get punished into a 9.4, 9.6. Just some faint spine ticks along the edge, but another really strong copy. And again, buying this for many reasons, the cost to acquire the book, and then the potential increase in value just from a raw book perspective, but also if I were to get the book graded. And that one is one of my go-tos at Mile High Comics. Next is a 15 center. This is Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos #80. This is from 1970 with cover art by Dick Ayers. And this, along with a lot of the horror titles with Marvel, they often get really overlooked in terms of collectability. But then there's a very active segment of comic book collectors that also target these books as well. And that's why I've been more active over the last couple of years in terms of looking at historically and nostalgically speaking at some of the genres that really were important of that time, and maybe not as important to me when I was a kid collecting, but certainly just my overall appreciation of the hobby, looking at war comics, and then also this tie-in from Nick Fury into the kind of like superhero age of comics as well. Looking at the condition, this looks to be a really strong, nice copy. The top edge of the book looks really, really nice and sharp. Corner has just the slightest of blunting there, but the spine looks to be really nice, really sharp. Not really seeing any spine ticks at all. A little bit of stress near both of the staples, but not bad. And then down here as well. So this could be potentially like a 9.6 candidate. It always blows my mind when I see this book from 1970, 50 to 55 years old in this condition. And again, strong colors. That's another thing I really love about the books that I pick up from Mile High. When I'm purchasing them in near mint, I do feel like it has to be some of the criteria that they use before they assign a near mint. It's just in terms of the vibrancy and the appeal of the cover. I think that is noted in the Mile High grading standard. They've kind of created their own rules for grading, but I do believe I remember reading something about just the general appearance also just affecting it. And by appearance, meaning the old comment about how a book presents well. This book, whether it's raw or graded, presents well. Just great use of the primary colors here and perspective. And, picking up a book like this makes me want to potentially pick up other Silver Age comics if this is the condition for a near mint book. It's just something to think about because they do need to be consistent. So if you're picking up Sergeant Fury #80 or you're picking up a Fantastic Four Silver Age comic and they're both listed as near mint, I would expect to receive a Fantastic Four from the Silver Age in the same condition. Obviously, it would be more expensive, but I'm trying to also kind of experiment with maybe some titles that aren't as popular, but same era, same condition, so that I can make more informed future purchases. All right, a lot of information for that book, but like I said, I then can use my experience with a book like that to purchase a book like this. And this is the big book from the order. This is House of Mystery number 185 from 1970, another 15 center, and this is cover art by Neil Adams. This is a book that I had taken a look at on Mile High Comics for quite some time. I think about this a lot. I know Comic Citizen and I discussed this in terms of value versus risk and upside and when to splurge on a bigger book and when to hold back and when to find the $10 to $30 books and eras and ages and things like that. And what I try to do is balance this order where the majority of the books are around a certain price point. I do try and treat myself, so to speak, with a more expensive book, as long as I'm able to find maybe a couple of much cheaper books with a lot of potential and upside too, just so that I balance out the order. Now, what I will say as I was explaining or trying to justify my purchase is this does have a number of spine ticks that I am disappointed in. They're very faint, but here's one that's pretty easy to see. A couple more along the spine too. I'm counting here if it's difficult to see. Maybe it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, if I keep going all the way to the top, 9, 10. There's about 10 different color breaking ticks. They're all hairline and minor. This is a book that I would still get pressed just to kind of maximize the grade. But this is probably an 8.5 to a 9.0 max. So a little disappointing here because in a 9.8, this has real significant value that you'll see in the order summary. But nevertheless, just trying to accumulate books like this because I don't think they're really going to be a lot of high-grade copies out in the market over time. And if I am going to pick up House of Secrets, House of Mystery, books of that era, getting a Neil Adams cover, to me, it's worth the extra time and investment to pick that up. Moving on, the next one is Flaming Carrot Comics, number 27. This is from Dark Horse Comics. Not a book that I would typically collect, except for a couple of reasons. One, it definitely has a lot of value and potential value, but also cover art on this book by Todd McFarlane. So you basically get the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles here who are appearing in this issue of Flaming Carrot Comics, drawn by Todd McFarlane. And TMNT, not regularly illustrated by McFarlane. This might be Todd's only TMNT work. And so there's definite collectability amongst McFarlane collectors for a book like this. Looking at the condition of this older Dark Horse Comics book, the spine looks to be almost perfect. Except down here, right at the edge, at the corner, there is some splitting or whitening. You know, could be bindery tearing, hard to say. Same thing at the top, just slight tearing, although that could just be the artwork of the balloon. So strong copy, you know, if I'm guessing, definitely in that 9.4, 9.6 range, maybe a 9.8 candidate. But as a Todd McFarlane fan and collector, this was an issue that I recently became aware of thanks to Como Comics and his videos where he talks about his budget lists, and this was on one of his lists, so I'll have to mention to him, send him a thank you for making me aware of that. The next book's super fun. This is Lobo number 1. Might be my favorite Simon Bisley cover of all time. I think this is probably the cover that really made me aware of his particular art and style. This is issue 1 of the original Lobo miniseries. Not his first appearance, obviously. That was in Omega Men. But the first issue of the self-titled series. I think at the time, DC was kind of looking for their Wolverine, so to speak, and wanted to kind of put Lobo out there. And he has a fun character design. It's a great cover. This is really easy to find, though. And because it was pretty affordable on Mile High Comics. But again, looking at the potential, if this is a 9.8 candidate, and looking at the condition here, there's some very subtle ticks that I'd have to inspect in a bit more detail, but for the most part, the corners look pretty good. They all have just a slight rounding. It's very subtle, very faint, but really not too bad. I would just say for the age of the book, that's expected, but this looks to be a really strong copy the more I look at it. So really happy to add this. And this was one of the books that I was talking about. Like if I'm going to invest in a House of Mystery Neil Adams book, raw, sight unseen, I also want to include books like this in the order where it's a minimal investment with a lot of potential and upside. And that helps kind of offset everything in terms of the value that I'm trying to add to my collection. Now, I also picked up a few X-Men books. This is Uncanny XMen 159. Another book featuring Bill Sienkiewicz on cover art, and also another book featuring Dracula. In this issue, Storm becomes a vampire after she gets bitten by Dracula himself, and that's her in the background. So I've always loved this cover. This one is really tough because of the all black sideline of the border near the spine. And while the spine looks to be okay, there's a little bit of a chip here. And then down here, the corner is chipped pretty badly. even blunted a little bit there. So a little bit of a swing and miss on this one. Same thing with this corner. Probably maxes out at a 9 or maybe even an 8.5. It could end up being a 9.2. There's a little bit of a stack increase. Some work would have to be done with this, but not a 9.8 candidate, unfortunately, on that one. And then we have Uncanny XMen 167. Cover art here by the legendary Paul Smith. And also, this is a newsstand copy. And the reason I picked this one up, these particular issues of Uncanny XMen, there's a lot of them, very easy to find, not super valuable, even in a CGC 9.8, except some of these in newsstand are, and this one is included on that list of valuable newsstand copies. And, you know, you could tell that this is miswrapped, and I kind of have a love-hate with that. To me, it affects the presentation of it when it is miswrapped, but sometimes it can protect the spine in terms of color breaking ticks. The unfortunate part is there does appear to be some kind of like ink staining or discoloration, so I'll have to see what I end up grading this book and what I think its potential could be, but probably not necessarily a 9.8 candidate, but could end up being in that 9.4, 9.6 range. It does have some non-color breaking ticks that would have to be pressed out to maximize the grade on that one. The next book is Ghost number 0. This is from 2012. The only reason I bought this is for the Jenny Frison cover art. As a Frison fan, I love finding either forgotten Frison covers or just covers that she did kind of before she gained the following that she has. And to me, this is a cover as good as any cover that she would put out today. You know, if this were a retailer incentive, a 1 in 100, I feel like it would be collectible because she's providing the cover art. In terms of condition, this looks really strong. This is kind of a hit or miss book. Very, very cheap, very easy to find, very affordable. So if you don't hit a 9.8 on this one, it doesn't have much value at all, but still, as Frison collectors are looking for 9.8s, and this one looks to be pretty strong, could be a 9.8 candidate. Would love for her to do a signature series signing event at CGC, as it's probably time for me to send some of these books in, and this would be a great book for her to sign. Another book I've had my eye on for a long time is Gotham City Sirens number 1. This series by DC has always had a following, and now there is a new series out, which is giving some attention to the original Gotham City Sirens series. But this issue is technically the first team appearance of Catwoman, Poison Ivy, and Harley Quinn, with cover art by Guillaume March, which features very, very precise line work on the characters, which adds to the collectability of the book. And then in terms of the condition, it does have a stack increase, but I think it's pretty strong. I can't wait to rebag and board these, as you can see that the book is beyond the bag and board. It's just everything's too loose in the bag and board that Mile High Comics supplied, so I'm going to very carefully move this out. It definitely needs a press to get the stack increase out, and it looks to me like there's one tick right up here that could be problematic. It does not break color, but borderline 9.698, so a lot of potential value in this one. Really glad that I picked that one up. A couple more to go. This is Batman 609. This features the first appearance of Thomas Elliot, who later becomes Hush. This began the epic run of Batman by Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee, and Scott Williams, with Jim Lee on cover art here. Always love when Mile High Comics makes this book available, and this looks to be a really, really nice, strong copy. Spine looks great. Corners are sharp. Excellent. So this looks to be like another good pickup in a 9.8 candidate. And there's always that rumor floating around that Hush will appear in a future Matt Reeves Batman movie, so you never know. That book kind of goes up and down in terms of popularity and value. The last book, X-Men 24. This is from 1993. This is the other book, along with, I would say, Ghost 0 and Lobo number 1, where there's minimal investment, very, very low risk, but a lot of potential with a book like this. Easy to find, yes, but in a 9.8, has really nice value in a CGC 9.8. And after applying that 70% coupon, it's not like Mile High Comics was giving this book away, but it kind of felt like it. Looking at the condition, really sharp, A lot of potential here to be a 9.8 candidate. I don't see any color breaking ticks along the spine, so that's good. A little bit of just the slightest of chipping down here on the corner, as well as some minor blunting to that top corner, but that looks super strong too. So I would say overall, just doing a quick condition summary, these books probably to me are in better condition than I would normally expect. All of these here are probably at least 9.6s, if not 9.8 candidates. But I think what I need to be careful of is that, a book like this book alone cost me a lot more than these other comics did combined. And it is not even a 9.4 candidate. And this is the book that I spent the most money on. And so that's part of what you kind of have to live and learn and figure out with Mile High Comics is it worth it? It's so tempting to make that big splurge and investment in a book like this. But based on the condition, this one, of course, had the worst condition out of all of these books. But that might be okay because I do factor in risk when I'm making these purchases. So I want to show you now what I paid for these books and then compare the cost to acquire these books with the fair market values to determine if I added any value to my collection and if any of these books have additional value if I were to submit them in for grading. All right, here is the order summary for the comics that I purchased from Mile High Comics on September 14th, 2024. So as promised, a recently placed order instead of an order from 2 or 3 years ago, where you can see that I took advantage of that 70% off discount coupon. So in column I, this is the amount that was listed on the Mile High Comics website, and then column L is the actual cost of the book. So when you see House of Mystery 185 being $303 and it only being a $135 high grade raw, no one would want to pay that much, but after a 70% off coupon, it being $90.90, well, then someone like me might want to gamble and take a chance on it, and that's what I did. So you can see the drastically reduced prices, which then becomes a bit more budget friendly, but you still can't just go onto Mile High and stumble on any book and say, oh, well, it's 70% off, so it's worth it. You still have to kind of track down and find those books that really are worth spending a little bit of additional money and additional risk at Mile High, and that's what I did. But all told, this order, I was invoiced $297.50 to acquire these 14 books from Mile High Comics. I did have to pay $11 to insure the order based on the total cost, but I did get free shipping. And so what I do is I distribute the $11 across all of the books here in the total cost column so that I can see and track my door-to-door investment in the comic book that will help me determine if it's worth investing in it further in terms of getting it cleaned, pressed, and graded. If my math is correct and I summarize my total cost, it does match the invoice of $297.50. Now, I want to talk about the individual highlights, but in total, according to the cover price fair market value of these books raw, if I did nothing with them, I have added $178.50 of value to my collection. So a nice positive amount on top of the $297.50 of value that is already present. And the book adding the most raw value is that House of Mystery 185. $43.31 of positive value added when compared to the cover price fair market value of the raw book. That Uncanny XMen 167, really common, easy to find, right? The newsstand copy, I spent $16.99 to acquire it. Cover price has that newsstand copy, fair market value at $42, so a nice positive $25.01 value add there. The Flaming Carrot Comics, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Todd McFarlane, it cost me $19.69 to acquire. Cover price has that book at $49 for a nice $29.31 value add. And Batman 609, love picking that one up. $22.39 for Batman 609. That to me is a 9.8 candidate. $24.61 of raw value added as cover price has that at $47. Not every pick was a winner. Sergeant Fury, I did pick up for $17.29. Cover price has that book at $7. That's typically because that title is not as desirable or popular. I would argue that your average Marvel Comics collector may not even know that that series exists. I certainly didn't until I got older. However, I think once I start plugging in some probable grades for these, you'll see that the CGC value potential is so high, and that's one of the reasons I picked it up. But from a raw book perspective, a loss of $10.29. The only other loss was minor. Lobo #1. I spent $9.19 on that book. Cover price has that at $9. But if you look at the total cost, like I said, what I'm trying to do is balance the order where you can see that kind of my sweet spot is like $15 to $30 per book, and that's after the coupon is applied. And then I'll splurge on one big book. In this case, it was House of Mystery, $185. And then I'll have a few books kind of mixed in that are really low risk, high reward, minimal cost type books. X-Men 24 cost me $7.99 to acquire that book. Thor 333 from 1983, $7.39. Lobo #1 under $10, and Ghost #0, that Jenny Frison book, $3.49. Even though it's only an $8 book, I'm happy to spend $3.49. It's less than what you would pay for her working on a standard cover A or a standard like cover B variant. Now, this is all nice and everything, but we really do need to think about condition and factoring in the grade of the book, because that really is driving everything. To me, condition is the ultimate variant. So let's start plugging in some grades here. Now, this is something that I'm going to try. When I was developing the potential value index, particularly with Mile High Comics, the PVI, there's essentially two different versions. There's PVI across the board of all of the books that I track, where I can assign that score and that number. But I tweak that formula specifically for Mile High Comics because I've been buying from them for many years now, and the average grade of their near mint book is 9.2. And I've always done this where I've opened up an order from Mile High Comics and I say, oh, near mint is supposed to be 9.4. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment because it kind of depends on where you're buying comics from. There's certain graders that are harsher or more lenient than others that don't always assign a 9.4 to a near mint book. So what we're going to do for the first time is actually assign a 9.2 to these. So this is the Mile High near mint. And to me, this is what drove the PVI for each of these books for me to ultimately be influenced by that metric to purchase these specific books from Mile High over others. And it's really about being realistic. And so 9.2 being the realistic grade, the cover price fair market value really won't change that much because their near mint range is 9.0 to 9.4. So really, it doesn't matter if I put a 9.2 or 9.4 in here. The only time it would change, which I think some of these did because my raw value total went down, is if there is a higher fair market value in a lesser grade, because until I assign a grade, I'm just taking the maximum cover price FMV. So it will take a near mint book, for example, and say it's $100 near mint, but then there could be a sale of an 8.0 that went for $125. Until I give it a grade, I assign the raw book value at $125. Because in theory, a book in a worse condition shouldn't have sold for more than a better condition. And this is part of the problem that I've had over the years with really trying to analyze raw book values using cover price. However, still 9.2 assigned to each of these books, then the raw value add dips to 111.50. But now we can start to look at the CGC value of $170 total if I were to send all of these books into CGC, and they came back as 9.2. So this is a little bit different than I had done before, where I would assume, I would blindly send them in and they get 9.4s. But if I'm telling you that Mile High Comics near mint is 9.2, then that's what we have to go with. And what I ended up doing was looking at the raw books in this way, downgrading them from 9.4 to 9.2, and then also factoring in the probability of improvement on these books to assign the potential value index metric. So what I did is I took into consideration the probability for, let's say, me to purchase a Batman 609 from Mile High Comics, that it come back typically in a 9.2, and then the probability that I could improve it to the next grade, or the probability that it would stay and remain at a 9.2. And I built this formula so that it assigned a very, very grounded and realistic metric, and still these books had value. And you can see that this actually worked better than it had done in the past, because we're looking at a positive raw book value add in total. It's not perfect. Again, the Sergeant Fury book is the exception that's kind of skewing this a little bit. And even the books that are negative, they're kind of a break even. And that's part of my philosophy and looking at risk when making these types of purchases. And if we look at Gotham City Sirens right now, 9.2 has a CGC value of $53. So if I were to send that book in for grading and it got a 9.2, after all of the CGC fees and shipping back and forth, I would have lost $1, essentially a break even. So that told me that it's worth it. Now, some of these books like Ghost Number Zero, you could say, well, that's a negative 26. So that kind of goes against what you were saying, because it essentially, I don't know if the $2 value is accurate. It may as well be zero. But let's look at these books if they did get 9.8s, and you'll start to see that a book like Ghost Number Zero, while not having any value in a 9.2, has so much value in a 9.8 with a very minuscule investment of $3.49 that then offsets that probability of it getting a 9.2 with no value. So let's flip these. I do believe that some of these are 9.8 candidates. I don't believe that all of them are. We know that the House of Mystery 185 is not. But just for fun, we can take a look at 9.8, where if these 14 books all got a 9.8 from CGC, I would have a CGC value add of $4,467. That obviously is driven here by House of Mystery 185, which is almost a $1,700 book in a 9.8. This is why I splurge and try and get a big book. I will tell you, though, that in my history of purchasing from Mile High, I don't believe any of these, like, more expensive one-off books that I pick up, I don't think any of them have been 9.8 candidates. So it is something I need to think about going forward, where I could take that $91.69 and apply it to 3 other Bronze Age books and probably have not necessarily the potential to get $1,500 or $1,600 or $1,700, but certainly better value than that book basically being stuck at a 9.0. And just for kicks, let me just show you what a 9.0 looks like. $81. So I end up losing money. Probably won't even bother getting that book graded, but I'll move it back to 9.8 just to remain consistent with this part of the evaluation. And so you can see Ghost Number Zero, it jumps to $99. The least valuable CGC 9.8 in this order, although the X-Men 167 newsstand is missing. Let me see if it at least has a 9.6, which it does, $80. But this is where that probability formula works out to say, hey, it's still worth the $3.50 investment. Now, you can also say that you don't really need spreadsheets or any analysis to tell you that if you can find a really nice Jenny Frison cover that's a 9.8 candidate for $3.50, it'd be worth picking up. Even if you didn't even know what the CGC 9.8 value was, you could probably just guess that, yeah, it probably has some value. It's hard to disagree with that logic. But let's just very quickly go over some of the other potentials here, especially some of those that I had noted are probably 9.8 candidates. Batman 609, $157 in a 9.8. Creatures on the Loose 34, $546 in a 9.8. I think there's just too many color breaks. I don't think that one's going to get a 9.8. The Flaming Carrot 27, $342. I think that one had potential. Gotham City Sirens at 112. This one has fallen back a little bit, not as valuable as it once was. There's also a variant cover and incentive for that one that I think is chased after a bit more strongly than the standard cover A, but still over $100 on that one. Lobo number 1, that was another example of minimal investment, $9.19. I think that one is a 9.8 candidate as well. Man Thing number 1, always love picking that one up, $150 in a 9.8. The Sergeant Fury book, that one's tough. I'm leaning towards 9.4, maybe maxing 9.6 on that one, but $535 in a 9.8. Thor 333, probably the best example of a really low buy-in with some high value potential. The Werewolf by Night 29, not sure about that one. Would love to see that one get a 9.8, obviously at $792. I'll examine it a little bit more closely. I did notice a bit of a stack increase. There will need to be some further investment and work done in that one, but it would be great to see that one get a 9.8 or close to it. X-Men 159, $191. I don't think that one's a 9.8, unfortunately, because of the 2 issues on the corner. And last, X-Men 24, another example of a low buy-in, $7.99 for that comic, and it having a CGC 9.8 value of $169. Now, if you've watched a number of these unboxing videos where I've opened orders that I've placed with Mile High Comics, I think you'll notice that maybe, or hopefully, the numbers look a little bit stronger in this order. Now, certainly the additional discount from Mile High, that additional 10% of using that 70% off coupon over the typical 60% that I normally use when placing my orders with Mile High, that certainly is going to adjust these numbers and make them a bit more favorable. But I really enjoyed coming up with the metric because it really helped me better prioritize in a more realistic fashion. Whereas my old model, really, it looked at 9.4 CGC values, 9.8 CGC values, and then an expectation that the book would come back from Mile High Comics in a 9.4. And I was leaving a lot of variables out of the equation when I was trying to prioritize my purchases. With this new metric, I include not only the 9.2 grade, but also 9.6 probabilities for improvement, and just taking into account more realistic risk to pick up these books. One thing I didn't cover was the House of Mystery 185. While it was, I think it was $81 in a 9.2, in a 9.4, it's over $200. It's borderline. I think it has too many color breaking ticks, honestly, but the thought process behind it, right? This is where it's kind of like the condition mystery. That's what ultimately cost me on that book, is I just didn't hit on the condition of that one. But under normal circumstances, if I felt like it was a 9.2 that could be pressed into a 9.4, I spent $92 to pick it up. It's worth over $200 in a CGC 9.4, so there is that additional potential value add, which would have been positive. It would have been far cheaper for me to go about this purchasing from Mile High than just buying a CGC 9.4 outright. So I do feel like the way that I can evaluate these, it adds additional confidence into the metric in terms of be prioritizing and sorting which books should be purchased. Looking at the 14 books that I picked up from Mile High Comics, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled about the books themselves. I'm thrilled at the condition overall. Books from the 60s and 70s that I'm able to acquire and put into my collection and potentially even improve and add value. But also, I'm happy that I've kind of evolved my analysis into this new phase that ultimately not just provides additional confidence in terms of the analysis, but also boosting my confidence as a collector and my ability to pick out books to purchase. What do you think about these books that I picked up from Mile High Comics? Is it still too expensive? Is it still too much risk? It's a lot of money being passed around for books sight unseen, I understand. Would love to get your feedback. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting, and see you next time.